Hi Acadiana, I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Happy midweek to you. It is Wednesday, August the 28th. Hopefully you're having a great day so far. A bit on the humid side across Acadiana, but that is to be expected as we get toward the end of August. Tropics are still relatively quiet out there, so I'm not really expecting a whole lot of action here over the next few days, but some of the models are looking promising when it comes to some potential development, and we're also looking at the National Hurricane Center's forecast showing that there's a couple of areas that they are currently watching, and there might be a couple of other areas that might need to be watched maybe several days down the road. So let's get started with our current conditions. We do have some cloud cover starting to roll in across Acadiana, and we've got a lot of rain in the offshore waters. And I do think we're going to catch some of those showers and thunderstorms inland as we go through the day. 102 is the feels like temperature. Actually kind of glad that some of these clouds are starting to roll in because I've got a forecast high of 93 and 92 at 12:01. Well, we're cutting it a little bit close there. So if we get some more cloud cover, maybe we can hold on this temperature here about 92 to 93 degrees. But as you can see here on our cameras, there's a mix of sun and clouds, but there's more of a thin layer of clouds that's starting to stream in, and a lot of that is blown off from some of the bigger thunderstorms that we're seeing out in the offshore waters right now. But so far we don't have any rain coming down on the local interstate system here in Lafayette, Acadia, and St. Martin parishes. So here's a look at the radar right now. Again, we don't have a lot of rain on shore except over the southeastern portions of the region, but look at all the moisture that's farther out here in the middle part of the Gulf of Mexico. This is kind of an area of energy that's going to be lifting northward around a low pressure area that's currently over central Texas. It's the same low that kind of drifted across the Gulf of Mexico over the weekend, and now it's just pulling a lot of tropical moisture in. A real quick look at the Hammond radar just to kind of give you an idea of what's going on over southeastern Louisiana. Some of what you're seeing here that's developing just west of New Orleans is most likely going to continue on its track off toward the west-northwest. So with the daytime heating, I think we'll probably catch some of those showers and thunderstorms later this afternoon, while the rest of Acadiana, especially there along the coast, will probably see some of the showers pulling inland from the offshore waters a little bit later on in the day. So the rain chance is going to stay about 50% for most of the Acadiana region. Also got another hurricane anniversary, as this is a busy week when it comes to hurricane anniversaries, and there might be a few of you that might try to ding me on this one because there have been a lot of Facebook posts going around talking about how April 29th, which is Katrina and also Ida Day of landfall, that somehow August the 29th is like a Friday the 13th when it comes to Louisiana, because they added on some other storms, including I think it was Isaac, Gustav, and maybe Harvey has been kind of flying around on Facebook. But I will let you know there are only two hurricanes that we know that have made landfall, and I'll kind of clarify this landfall thing, on August the 29th, and that's Katrina and Ida. The other ones did not, including Hurricane Isaac, even though there was a second landfall. So Isaac made a landfall right there at the tip of the Mississippi River, which technically is a landfall, and then it continued to move northwest and made a second landfall at Port Fourchon, but that wasn't until August the 29th, and it was just after midnight too. So Hurricane Isaac's official first landfall on the U.S. coastline was in the evening on August the 28th, and then a lot of us here in Lafayette took on a lot of wind, and there were some heavy rains and a lot of wind east of us. This made landfall as a Cat 1 with 80 miles per hour winds. We had over 25 inches of rain over the North Shore area, $630 million worth of damage here in Louisiana, 5 losing their lives, including 1 in Vermilion Parish, and at one time half of Louisiana was without power when Hurricane Isaac came on shore. Now you also may notice that there is another Isaac right here on the list. Well, Isaac, even though it was a significant impact to Louisiana, it was not big enough, according to the World Meteorological Association, to retire that name. So could we have another Hurricane Isaac hit Louisiana? Yeah, it's possible because the name is on the list. So let's look at the big picture first of all as we start to get into more of the tropics. And I do want to give you some details on what's going to be happening here in the near term forecast. And remember that low that moved across the Gulf of Mexico over the weekend and brought us our first showers, chances for rain there on Sunday. Well, that low is now over Texas. So it is starting to pull in some deep tropical moisture around that from the Gulf of Mexico. And a lot of that is going to be sitting there over the next several days, which is why we probably should be watching the Gulf of Mexico. There's no indication on any of the models, and we're not seeing any indications that there are any pressures dropping over the Gulf of Mexico. But when you see this much moisture and this much coverage of cloud cover and thunderstorms over the Gulf of Mexico, it always is some case for concern. But we think a lot of this moisture is going to be streaming northward. Troughiness in the upper levels is going to be sticking around as another trough is going to be moving across the middle part of the country. And with that frontal boundary and a bit of a trough there in the upper levels, showers and thunderstorms can get going. Because in Louisiana, you usually have tons of moisture at the surface. That's the humidity that we feel every day. And then you get the daytime heating that gets the air to lift. But what we've seen a lot over the summer is a big ridge of high pressure has been high in the atmosphere. So the temperatures actually warm as you go higher up, which is not conducive for thunderstorm development. That's why we've had a lot of sunshine and those very hot temperatures. Well, in this particular case, the upper levels are going to be considerably more moist and also a lot more unstable. So as the sun heats the land and the air starts to lift, showers and thunderstorms with that troughiness in the upper levels are able to develop a lot easier. And with that extra moisture out there, there's a potential we could see some pretty good downpours with some of these. And as far as the wave heights out there today, I think they're going to be a little stronger over the western part of the Gulf of Mexico. For our friends that are working on some of the rigs offshore in Louisiana, you're probably seeing 1 to 3 foot seas in the nearshore waters, 2 to 4 in the far offshore waters. But around thunderstorms, of course, winds and seas are going to be pretty strong. But also out there, you get some pretty skies, especially with those thunderstorms that develop off in the distance. So I'm sure there's some folks that are out there working that are probably seeing some beautiful skies with the thunderstorms mixed with the sunshine out in the Gulf of Mexico. Feel free to share those on my social media pages. I'd love to see it. But also this map coming from the National Weather Service in Lake Charles yesterday, and I do have a link to the National Weather Service down in the description below. Expected rainfall through Monday could get up to maybe 3 or 4 inches up along the I-10 corridor, but keep in mind this is from now Wednesday all the way through Monday, so you're talking about a 5-day rainfall total. So if it comes little by little and we end up getting 3 or 4 inches of rain between now and the end of the day on Monday, most likely we're not going to be seeing any flooding issues here in Acadiana. But we'll watch that, of course. Could see some localized flooding with some of those heavier downpours. Elsewhere in the tropics, still some troughiness over parts of Central America and some moisture coming in from the east. So that also will add to some of the moisture over the Bay of Campeche. In the Caribbean, we have a tropical wave that is right about there, and that's going to continue to move off toward the west. This is not the area that the National Hurricane Center is watching right now, but one of the areas is this little swirl here. We talked about this yesterday, and we also talked about it on Monday as we see that swirl at the surface, but not a lot of thunderstorm activity, and there's some pretty good wind shear coming in out of the southwest that's blowing the tops over those thunderstorms. But that little ripple of energy that's out there in the middle part of the Atlantic is probably going to sit here for a while, and the National Hurricane Center putting a very slim chance that we could see some development there. But the main focus is going to be out here in the middle part of the Atlantic with all of this kind of moving off toward the west-northwest. And the National Hurricane Center, of course, has the potential for some of that development there over the central Atlantic, perhaps westward over toward the northern Leeward Islands. And there's that little blip there southeast of Bermuda that might even have a chance for some development too. And then farther out, you've got a big tropical wave, or at least a lot of moisture that's coming off of the African coast right in here. So this will be something that we'll be watching as well, as some of the tropical models going farther down the road beyond a week are indicating several possible tropical systems out in the Atlantic as we go into the second week. And yesterday I was telling you that I was waiting for the Global Tropical Hazards Outlook to update. This updated yesterday afternoon. And in week 2, which would be next week, starting on September the 4th, you can see that most of the tropical Atlantic has some potential for some development. But I also want you to notice that area there. And we're going to focus on that a little bit more in some of the models. And then maybe not as much action in the Gulf of Mexico for week 3, but it does appear that the Atlantic could possibly have some action out there. So let's just roll through some of our model suites again. And this is the latest GFS model. We're going to just take it out for 10 days. And you can see that there's a few tropical waves trying to work their way across the Atlantic, maybe a couple of organized low pressure areas. You might also see at the very, very end of that loop going out to day 10, that there's a bit of a ripple of low pressure over parts of the Bay of Campeche, right about in here. There it is, that last little frame there. And then there's also a little bit of a low that's over Haiti and the Dominican Republic. So there are hints that we could see some development here in the next 10 days out over the Atlantic basin. The euro, which came down early this morning, not quite as robust, although it is keeping a lot of moisture over the Gulf of Mexico as you get into day 7, 8, 9, and 10 out here. And then maybe a low developing out in the middle part of the Atlantic there in the early part of September. Canadian model earlier today was pretty active with tropical waves moving westward. This time around, there's one moving there through the Windward Island or the Leeward Islands, and possibly, check that out, getting closer to Florida. So again, the models seem to be warming up to the idea that we could see some development out there. And the Icon model going out just 7 days, but the Icon has been showing some ripples of energy, not just over the Gulf of Mexico, but also over the Caribbean Sea and in the Atlantic as well. In fact, kind of a parade of lows moving their way across. And we are going to be looking at that there and this here over the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, because I'm going to go through 4 models here just looking at a still shot of a week from today. So this is going to be next Wednesday. And the reason I'm showing you this is partly because of the global tropical development hazards showing that we could see maybe some development in this particular area going out beyond 7 days. But the GFS a week from today, a lot of moisture out here in the Western Gulf, maybe a little bit of a low pressure area over the Yucatan and quite a bit of moisture over here as well, but not anything developing, at least with the GFS. So the euro going out 7 days looks very similar to the GFS. A lot of moisture over the western part of the Gulf of Mexico and a lot of moisture over the eastern part of the Caribbean Sea, but both models, again, not indicating any tropical development. So let's move on to the Canadian. The Canadian model is showing a significant tropical system developing over the northern Leeward Islands. Again, this is a week from today, so next Wednesday. And also there's just a little bit of a ripple of low pressure that's there over the western part of the Gulf of Mexico. Now, as you saw in the Canadian model earlier, this here is moving off toward the northwest and is focused to be closer to Florida by day 10. So this is the day 7, but by day 10, the low pressure area there is forecast to be near Florida, while the low that's over the Gulf of Mexico really doesn't do a whole lot. And again, the Icon model doesn't go out beyond 7 days, but this is a week from today. You can see there is a low pressure area there over the western part of the Gulf of Mexico. That could possibly be a developing tropical depression. It does have a lot of action down here in the Bay of Campeche in days 3, 4, and 5, and then kind of matures a little bit more as it moves up toward the north. And then we'll also have to watch this area here over the southeastern part of the Caribbean Sea. Even though the Icon isn't indicating any low pressure area there, there is a lot of moisture and maybe some lowering pressures a little bit. That looks like 1008 on the low pressure scale, so maybe there could be something developing over the eastern part of the Caribbean Sea. So nothing in the next 5 days, but maybe something coming up going into next week. But I still think we need to watch the Gulf of Mexico with all the action that's out there. There's a possibility you can sometimes get something homegrown that likes to fire up. Now, the Gulf of Mexico's wind shear today is relatively low, especially here where all of that rain is So if something wants to try to develop, the wind shear isn't going to be too much of an inhibiting factor. There's a lot more wind shear here over the eastern part of the Gulf of Mexico, moving off toward the south and east like that. And then the Caribbean as well as the Atlantic, you're almost zero on the wind shear there. So anything that works its way in that region would definitely have a chance. And of course, the water temperatures, that's the other concern. Again, why always have to watch the western part of the Gulf of Mexico. Those waters are over 86 degrees. And also this area here where the National Hurricane Center thinks we could see some development. Those are areas with also some very high temperature water and also some high heat content there too. The high heat content is the water that goes down below the surface that also can also support those very high, can support tropical systems trying to develop. If they can tap into some of that deeper water, we can see some quick development there. So that is also the concern, the tropical cyclone heat potential in those particular areas. One other thing, and we talked about this, and part of the reason why a lot of the forecasts for the early season were calling for some pretty high numbers as we were transitioning from El Nino to La Nina. And looking at the temperatures there over the western part or the eastern part of the Pacific Ocean west of the South American continent, we are seeing the water temperatures still tending to trend a little bit cooler, although not really a significant La Nina, and even some of the forecast models have backed away. Rather than having a moderate La Nina, they're talking about very slight La Nina and maybe even staying in the neutral conditions. So maybe not as strong, and that might be why some of the why we haven't seen quite as many tropical systems out there. Wind shear has been a little bit strong over the Atlantic so far. So tropical waves that are moving westward have had a little bit harder time developing. We had a lot of dry air and Saharan dust out there. Does that mean we're not still going to see an above normal season? Well, all we need is 14 to make it a normal season, and we've already got 5 under our belt. Usually September on average brings about 4. October brings about 4, so that would bring us up to 13 if we just get the normal, and November usually 2, so that would take us to 15. So if we just stay normal for the remainder of the hurricane season, we can still finish with an above normal season. So make sure you continue to stay prepared and make sure you're gathering the things that you need while most of those things are available widely, and you don't have to fight a lot of folks at the stores to get them, because you know how it goes here in South Louisiana. When that cone starts pointing at South Louisiana, a lot of folks start to go out there and get all their stuff, and it's a little bit more of a panic buy. And if you get your stuff right now, it'll save you a lot of time farther down the road. So that's what I've got for you today on Let's Talk Tropics. If you enjoy these discussions, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and also turn on those notifications too. That way you know when Let's Talk Tropics starts live on Thursday, or when the morning show Acadiana Weather Today drops sometime around 7:30. Stay safe, everyone. Hopefully you get a little shower today to cool you down. Maybe you can get a nap later in the day with those scattered showers, but do keep in mind that the showers and thunderstorms are going to be covering more ground as we go toward the second half of the week, and especially for the Labor Day weekend. So if you've got those pool or barbecue plans for the Labor Day weekend, make sure you've got the radar handy so that you can check out when those showers and thunderstorms come in. Hope you all have a great day. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. I'll see you tomorrow.